Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Abigail had been excited all day about the party happening that night. It was a big event for the company she worked for, a celebration marking the end of a major project, complete with music, drinks, and a festive atmosphere. Spouses had been invited, and even though Marcus was more reserved, she insisted on bringing him along. She'd carefully picked out her dress early in the day, wanting to feel confident and elegant beside her husband. She knew her coworkers could be formal, but she was eager to show a relaxed side while also honoring her team's hard work. Marcus, as usual, stayed calm and low-key. He dressed plainly and accompanied her to the venue as if it were just another social obligation, while Abigail buzzed with excitement at being there. As soon as they arrived, she noticed the atmosphere matched exactly what she'd expected: polite conversations, courteous smiles, and managers moving through the crowd with watchful eyes. Still, the room was packed, and glasses of sparkling wine were being passed around. Before long, Abigail felt more at ease among her colleagues, sharing laughs, listening to light-hearted stories, and drinking more than she'd planned, while Marcus. As the night wore on, Abigail felt the alcohol kick in. Her sense of restraint began to blur amid the easy chatter and compliments she was receiving. She noticed people looking at her. She felt attractive, desired, even a little euphoric. When Marcus quietly called her over, saying he was tired and wanted to leave, she got annoyed. She told him she still wanted to enjoy herself, chat more with the other wives, and have another glass. He hesitated but eventually left on his own, giving her a quick kiss and asking her to call a ride-share when she was ready to head home. Alone, Abigail kept drinking and laughing loudly. She felt free of any responsibilities. Some guests had already started leaving, and the room was beginning to empty out. That's when she realized she couldn't drive. Her heels felt unsteady, her head spun slightly, and her phone showed multiple unread messages from Marcus, messages she didn't even bother reading properly. She ordered a private driver through an app she usually used in emergencies. After confirming the ride, she went outside to wait, laughing to herself about something she couldn't even remember anymore. When the car pulled up, Abigail blinked several times, thinking it might be some kind of illusion. Trevor got out. He wore a cap from the ride service, a dark jacket, and a badge clipped to his shirt. She covered her mouth and let out a loud, surprised laugh. Trevor tried to smile but looked visibly uncomfortable. He quickly explained he was doing side gigs as a driver to pay bills after losing his job at a startup, and that tonight was just another route among many. She got into the car still laughing, saying it must be fate. His cologne hit her like a trigger. She'd had too much to drink and started talking louder, looser, and more intimately than she should have. She mentioned she'd always thought Trevor was handsome and joked that Marcus ought to worry about leaving her alone like this. Trevor tried to lighten the mood with jokes and sidestep her hints, but Abigail grew more direct. What had begun as casual banter started veering into dangerous territory. She reached over to touch his arm as she spoke, complimenting his eyes and saying Marcus never looked at her that way. Trevor grew tense. He asked her to buckle up and suggested turning on the radio to distract her, but Abigail wouldn't stop. She said she felt alive with him there, that her marriage had grown cold, that she needed to feel something different, and though she didn't know what she was doing, she didn't want to stop either. When he pulled over on a nearby street to calm her down and talk, she leaned in and kissed him. He resisted. He tried saying it was wrong, that she was married to his best friend, that they had a friendship too valuable to throw away. But Abigail persisted. She said he was alone too, that life was made of moments like this, and that he knew there'd been tension between them for a while. Trevor stared straight ahead, closed his eyes, muttered something she couldn't hear, and then gave in. What happened next was quick, confusing, and intense. Abigail surrendered to the impulse. They had sex right there in the back seat, engine off, windows fogged up. As soon as it was over, Abigail sat in silence, straightening her dress, trying to process what she'd just done. The adrenaline faded, replaced by a terrible emptiness. Trevor stayed quiet, his face turned toward the steering wheel. Neither of them spoke. She grabbed the jacket he'd taken off, wrapped it around her shoulders, and asked him to take her home. The air in the car was icy, not from open windows, but from the guilt already settling over them both. Trevor drove in silence all the way to her front door. Abigail got out without looking back, heart pounding and a bitter taste in her mouth. She knew something deeply serious had been shattered that night, though she still didn't grasp the full extent. Abigail walked into the house with heavy shoulders and the feeling that the ground beneath her feet had never been so fragile. Her body still carried the mingled scent of perfume and alcohol, and Trevor's jacket draped over her shoulders was a silent reminder of the mistake she'd made. Marcus sat motionless on the couch, face rigid, eyes locked on her. His phone rested on the table, but his full attention was fixed on his wife. She tried to smile, as if returning from an ordinary tiring night out, but his expression didn't change. The silence that followed felt like a wall she couldn't cross. He asked how the party had been. His voice was flat, devoid of warmth or interest, just a formality laced with bitterness. Abigail swallowed hard and said it had been good, that she'd drunk more than intended and, for safety, hired a designated driver. Marcus then asked why she hadn't answered his calls or messages. She replied that her phone had been in her purse, that she'd been talking with coworkers, that she'd lost track of time. Each word seemed to dissolve in the air before reaching him. Marcus's gaze remained hard and steady, as if he were just waiting for her to finish speaking. Without a word, Marcus stood up, walked to the table, and picked up a flash drive. He plugged it into his open laptop and clicked on a file. The screen immediately showed the inside of her car. Abigail felt the blood drain from her face. Months earlier, at Marcus's insistence, they'd installed a dash cam in the vehicle for safety, a precaution she'd thought excessive. She'd even forgotten it existed. The device recorded everything, video and audio. And now, that same camera had turned a secret into undeniable proof. The video started playing. Trevor appeared, opening the driver's door in his ride service uniform, getting in, adjusting the seat, and starting the car. Then Abigail came into view from the passenger side, laughing, leaning against the dashboard, clearly affected by alcohol. Their conversation began casually but quickly grew intimate. Her tone turned flirtatious, her touches appeared, compliments slipped out, and words crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. Until she leaned toward him, and kissed him. Trevor hesitated, said something indistinct on the recording, then gave in. They disappeared into the back seat. The audio was clear enough to capture sighs, fragmented phrases, moans, and afterward, a heavy silence. Abigail covered her face with her hands, begging Marcus to stop the video. He did, but not out of pity. He'd already watched it many times. He slowly closed the laptop and looked up at her. There was no shouting, no outburst. Marcus's silence hurt more than any insult. He said he'd gone to use the car that morning to pick up a package from the store when he noticed the dash cam was on. He decided to check the files and found everything. He pointed out there'd been no accident, no slip-up, just choices. A whole sequence of conscious decisions, one after another, leading straight to destruction. Abigail tried to explain, saying she'd been drunk, didn't know what she was doing, and had never planned any of it. Marcus raised his hand, cutting off her excuses. He told her she'd taken the lead from the very beginning, that Trevor had resisted before giving in, and that nothing about it had been accidental. What hurt most wasn't just the sex itself, but the fact that it had been with his closest friend, the best man at their wedding, the man who'd stood by him through life's hardest times. To Marcus, that was the point of no return. It was a double betrayal, as a wife and as a friend in a decades-long bond. She cried, trying to move closer, but Marcus stepped back. He said that night had destroyed any chance of trust between them. He asked her to sleep in the guest room. Abigail stood frozen in the living room, hugging herself, unable to think of anything that could undo what had happened. Marcus went upstairs to their bedroom and shut the door. The sharp sound echoed in her mind like a verdict. Abigail woke up before her alarm even rang. Her eyes burned, her throat was dry, and her head felt heavy. Still in her pajamas, she wandered through the house looking for Marcus, but he was already gone. In the living room, she found the envelope that marked the beginning of the end, bank documents, some cold instructions, and a forward note, "Let's handle this civilly." She read and reread it, searching for loopholes, signs of doubt, any trace of hope. There was none. His decision was final. Trying to catch her breath, Abigail stepped onto the balcony with her phone in hand. She typed a message to Trevor. Deleted it. Wrote it again. Deleted it once more. Finally, she sent something simple, "Can we talk?" Long minutes passed with no reply. She tried calling. Nothing. On impulse, she sent a voice note saying she needed to understand how he felt, that she needed to know if he was as shattered as she was. The message was heard, but never answered. The feeling of abandonment hit instantly. She felt like she was floating in a void created entirely by her own choices. That same afternoon, Marcus came back home only to collect a few belongings. Abigail tried to speak to him, but he remained silent. He packed some clothes, zipped his suitcase, and left without saying where he was going. She followed him to the gate, but he simply raised his hand, signaling her to stop. Abigail stood there, arms wrapped around herself, watching his car drive away with the suitcase in the back seat. When she returned inside, everything felt different. The same couch, the same table, but with a strange air, as if the house had ceased to be a home. For the next 2 days, Abigail shut herself off completely. She didn't want to eat, couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived the moment of the camera footage, Marcus's face as he watched it for the first time. She couldn't bear that image. The shame was physical, it started in her stomach and rose to her shoulders, as if something heavy pressed down on her without rest. She decided to reach out to Jillian, Marcus's sister. She called and asked to talk. Jillian agreed, though her tone was distant. They arranged to meet at a cafe near their mother's house. When Abigail arrived, Jillian was already seated. Their greetings were brief. Abigail tried to justify herself, explaining she'd been vulnerable, never intended to betray Marcus, and that everything spiraled out of control because of alcohol and emotional confusion. Jillian listened without interrupting. Then, calmly, she said she understood regret, but regret doesn't always erase the pain it causes. She told Abigail that Marcus wasn't just sad, he was humiliated. Trevor, his childhood friend and lifelong companion, had taken part in destroying his marriage. And Abigail, who'd always been warmly welcomed by the family, had betrayed everyone's trust with a single act. Abigail insisted Trevor shouldn't have lost his job. She revealed that Marcus had sent the recording to the ride service company, resulting in Trevor's firing for inappropriate conduct. Jillian, though surprised, said that was also a consequence. No one walks away unscathed from a situation like that. Even if Abigail had started it, Trevor had given in, and giving in is still a choice. Abigail tried defending Trevor, saying he'd hesitated and tried to stop it, but Jillian cut her off. Then why didn't he stop? Why did he go all the way? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Abigail fell silent. In the days that followed, Marcus officially filed for divorce. His lawyer sent over the papers with clear terms. He'd waive part of their shared assets if she vacated the house within 30 days. Abigail signed without protest. She had no energy left to fight for anything. She read the terms, read them again, and signed with trembling hands. Each signed page felt like another cut into the memory of the marriage she destroyed. She began living provisionally. She moved into a small rented apartment using money she'd saved from her savings account. She started working part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, just to keep her mind occupied and cover basic expenses. The nights were long. The silence in her new place was different. It wasn't the quiet of rest. It was the sound of absence. The sound of someone who'd lost everything. She tried reconnecting with old friends, but many already knew the story. Some didn't reply at all. Others were polite but distant. Even co-workers seemed to avoid her. News traveled fast, and a single rumor was enough to completely change how people saw her. Abigail found herself alone. Her phone barely rang. Messages stopped coming. Days blurred together: wake up, try to work, pretend to be strong, go home, collapse in silence. Every corner of her new apartment seemed to reflect a broken piece of herself. She avoided mirrors. Avoided old photos. When she tried writing about how she felt, the words came out jumbled. She gave up. She created an anonymous account on an online forum just to vent. She wasn't looking for advice or comfort, just the feeling that someone was reading, even if they never replied. She posted her first entry: I destroyed my marriage in one night. And I don't know who I am anymore. It got few views. No comments. Even there, she was invisible. One late afternoon, while unpacking one of the boxes still sitting in the corner of her living room, she found an old letter from Marcus. It was from their third year of marriage, a silly note filled with inside jokes and simple promises, like traveling more or learning to cook together. She read it aloud and collapsed onto the floor. She cried as if for the first time, as if all the regret she'd carried since that night had finally broken through the walls of her soul. And for the first time, she realized the loss wasn't just of a marriage. It was the loss of herself, of who she'd been before throwing everything away. Weeks dragged by with unbearable slowness. Abigail moved through life on autopilot. She kept schedules, gave minimal responses, offered polite smiles that hid the quiet desperation clinging to her. In the rare moments she tried stepping out of her emotional shell, the memory of what she'd lost pulled her right back in. Life went on for everyone else, but not for her. The marriage turned to dust. Her reputation dissolved. The peace she'd once taken for granted became unreachable. On a Sunday afternoon, while preparing a simple meal, her phone buzzed. It was an email notification from an unknown sender. When she opened it, she saw just one sentence: he's trying to move on. I hope you can too. The signature belonged to someone named Lauren. For a moment, Abigail thought it was a mistake. But when she clicked on the profile picture, she understood it wasn't. Lauren was Trevor's new girlfriend. According to public posts, they'd been together for a few weeks. Trevor hadn't blocked Abigail on social media, but he also hadn't reached out. It was as if she'd become invisible to him. Her stomach twisted. Her chest tightened. Abigail dropped the phone on the table and stared into space. Lauren hadn't written with bitterness, just a straightforward message. He'd moved on. She needed to accept it. Learning that Trevor had found a new path hurt in a different way. It wasn't jealousy, it was confirmation that nothing could be rebuilt. Not friendship. Not conversation. Not forgiveness. Trevor had chosen to erase it all. And as much as she still felt guilty for what she'd caused, she also sensed part of it was him running away. He'd never faced what happened. He'd vanished. And from all appearances, he'd started over without carrying any weight. Abigail took a blank sheet of paper and tried writing what she'd say to him if she had the chance. She started with, "I'm sorry for," and stopped. She'd already apologized 1,000 times, in her thoughts, in ignored messages, in voice notes deleted before sending. She didn't know what else to say. And the truth hurt more, maybe there was nothing left to say. Trevor had been part of the worst mistake of her life. And that placed him somewhere she could never revisit lightly. Days later, while opening the bathroom cabinet to grab a painkiller, she found the bottle of cologne Marcus used to wear. It was one of the few things he'd left behind. The scent brought back such vivid memories that Abigail had to sit down. She remembered the jokes he'd make when she got upset over little things, the mornings he'd brew coffee before leaving, the silly notes he'd leave on the fridge with doodles. None of it had seemed extraordinary while they were together. Only after losing everything did she understand the true value of what she'd had. She decided to write another anonymous post on the forum. This time, she didn't ask for understanding, she just told her story. She described what she'd lived through, the consequences, the silence, the emptiness, the lack of redemption. She received a few replies. One said, "You're not the first to regret things too late. And unfortunately, you won't be the last." Another, shorter one, simply read, "At least you get it now." That line struck her differently. It was simple but cut deep. Understanding after destruction is like finding the key after the door's already been knocked down. On a Monday morning, Abigail decided to visit a community center near her neighborhood. She'd heard they held support meetings for women dealing with loss, guilt, and rebuilding. She arrived not knowing what to expect. The group was small, and the stories were heavy. Each woman there carried a broken piece of her own history. One shared how she'd been cheated on and took years to trust again. Another said she'd cheated, lost custody of her kids, and was now fighting to win back their love. Listening to those confessions, Abigail realized her pain wasn't unique, and strangely, that brought some relief. When it was her turn, she hesitated, but she spoke. She told them about the party, the driver, the video, the divorce, the silence. No one interrupted. No one judged. At the end, an older woman approached and said, "Everyone has a day that destroys everything. What matters is what you do after." Abigail held on to those words like a reminder that she was still breathing, that she could still choose what to do with what remained. That same night at home, she opened a new browser tab and started searching for evening courses. Something simple, something to occupy her mind. She found one on digital content creation. She thought about storytelling, using anonymity to turn pain into narrative. Not to expose her own tragedy, but to create something new. Something meaningful. Something that might help others avoid the same mistakes. Before bed, she picked up Marcus's cologne one last time. She smelled it gently, thanked him silently, and threw the bottle away. Not out of disrespect, but as a farewell. She finally understood she couldn't redeem herself with him. Or with Trevor. Or with the past. But maybe, someday, she could forgive herself. And learn to live with what was left. She'd destroyed 3 lives in a single night. And spent months trying to reclaim at least her own. Maybe not everyone gets a happy ending. But there's always a way to keep going, even in silence, even with scars, even if no one's watching. Because sometimes, just surviving your guilt is the beginning of a new story. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.